today we start into economic growth. So chapter 6.
Let me just skip that.
Yes. So chapter 6 investigates long-term economic growth. What makes some countries grow and others stay stagnant? I mean, think about it. We've been around for, a few thousand years or so, right? Why did we end up in a place where Americans on average have $43,000 worth of income per person, and Zimbabwe has $500 per person? Why? What's going on? All right, so there's some amazing things throughout the globe that have happened over time on different ways we set up society. Economics is trying to satisfy unlimited wants with limited resources. The economic problem is faced by everyone. Why do we get these different outcomes when we start to explore different places across the globe? Some exciting things have happened in places like Japan and Malaysia and some countries in that area. Over the last 40 years, they went from very low levels of income per person, and in just a 30, 40-year time frame are starting to catch up to the United States. And some of those countries are in the 30 to 40,000 range. Why? What did they do that Zimbabwe didn't do? Right? We start to think about the world being our experiment. I don't want to use the word experiment, but our laboratory is the word I was looking for, to see if we can start to learn what are the secrets to economic growth. All right, so that's where this chapter kind of opens the door to thinking about things a little differently. So I want to start off today by listing some of that information out. And our variable we're going to focus in on for starters is per capita real GDP. Per capita real GDP, which I'll use the notation big Y, which we'll start to use all this semester for real GDP, a capital Y. And then I'll just put PC for per capita. Per capita real GDP, we talked about it before. I don't know if we explicitly wrote it on the board of what that means. What is it? What are we doing with the data, with different types of data to calculate per capita real GDP? Dividing real GDP by the population. So not just the labor force, which we learned as a subset of the population, or hopefully you learned that from Monday. Real GDP is, again, per person,
Sorry.
not per person income. Well, it is real GDP per capita is, but just GDP in general. Dollar value of all final goods and services, good. It's all the stuff flowing around the nation on an annual basis or quarterly basis or monthly basis or daily basis. All the crap we're buying at stores, the dollar value of all spending on final goods and services, which ultimately equals the income from that stuff. That's what GDP is. Real GDP is distinct from just any old GDP in what sense? Takes out that price effect. So we filtered out the price effect. We calculated the GDP deflator, which was the creation of an index number that kind of sucked out that price effect. In the big picture, real GDP, or nominal GDP, let's just say, is the sum of the price of all goods and services. The dollar value of haircuts, the dollar value of whiskey, the dollar value of pizza, the dollar value of lawyer services, all added up together gives us nominal GDP. With real GDP, we are focusing in on the quantity of stuff, which is the thing we ultimately care about as opposed to prices. If prices all double, does that hurt you? If prices all double, imagine going to Walmart and somebody pushed a button and everything in the store doubled in price. Would that hurt you? Yeah, okay, good. Katie said depends on your income. So if your income's fixed, it hurt you, right? You can buy half as much stuff. If Q was 100, it's now 50, right? By doubling the prices, we've cut the quantity of stuff you can put in your basket in half by doubling all the prices. However, if you were making $20,000 a year, and at the same time I doubled the prices, I doubled your income, or we can think of it as the money in your purse or the money in your wallet. If instead, as you walk through the door, they doubled all the prices, but you had $100 and now you have $200 in your wallet, did that hurt you? No. So there's a connection here between resource prices and output prices that we're going to continue to investigate throughout the rest of the semester. At this point, chapter 4 and 5, we learned how to measure these things. And now we're going to think about this on a per person basis. So per capita real GDP is simply real GDP divided by the population. Just so we're not confusing, real GDP is Y without the PC. So we've got real GDP divided by the population. So we're going to start to use these two things interchangeably. The Y typically denotes income. Real GDP, we start to think about spending. They're one and the same. So start to be able to use those two interchangeably. Fall back on our picture here. Spending equals income. I got it. No problem. Either way. Okay, so let's see here. So GDP 2009, just to give you some rough numbers here. If we look at the United States of America, known as one of the richest nations on earth, we have about $46,000 of real GDP per person. If we drop down to about 46,000, we run into some countries like Hong Kong, Singapore. I'm kind of generalizing. Might be around this 46,000. In other words, these countries have come close to closing the gap on the United States. Japan had some issues here. They lost about 10 years because of some problems, and they are at approximately 32,000. Central Europe some of those former Soviet Union, Eastern Bloc nations, they're coming in around 18,000 per person. And then down here near the getting towards the bottom, if we look at Central America, Central and South America, and mainland China, we think about these parts of the globe, you're going to find people earning about 8,000 to 11,000 per person. And then Africa varies across the board, but might find anywhere from even as low as 500 down to 2,000. But let's just put 2,000, depending on which countries we look at. So if we start to think about income around the world, the picture is very different. I mean, this is not insignificant, right? So you've seen the pictures on TV when there's fundraisers to try to help with human services in Africa. That's part of the reason, right? These are the income disparities that we see around the world. All right, so in 1960, these guys, Hong Kong, Singapore, we could include Japan in there. In 1960, these guys were down here. So in the 60s, these countries were down near Africa and Central and South America. So it has really created an environment where economists have been able to explore what changed. How is it possible that these countries essentially caught up or are close to catching up to the prosperity of the United States in terms of income per person? Again, I don't want to sidestep too much. There's other things in life, other measures of welfare that we look at, life expectancy, all kinds of access to drinking water, you name it. There's lots of other variables that are important to human welfare. So here we're looking at income. All right, so that raised the question, especially in the 90s is when we started to see Toyotas and in the 80s especially, with the example of Toyota, but these countries just started moving up the charts. It's like that hit record, just kind of moving up the charts like, wait a second, what's going on? This is different than what it's been the last 200 years. It's taken the United States 200 years to get where we're at, right? The birth of our nation, 1776, and then of course we were here for a little while before that. But these guys started doing some stuff and charged up their way in as little as 40 years. Okay, so what do you know about China? You guys hopefully listen to the news once in a while. They held that thing called the Olympics there the other day. You might have learned a little bit about China. What's going on in China nowadays? What's your impressions that you have from the popular media or otherwise? I'm not asking if you've researched this. Give me your thoughts on China. What do you know about them? Strict government. That's come out lately here. So let's just kind of brainstorm here. Strict government, right? So we got, and you said communist type system, okay? What else do you know about China? Overpopulated. Lots of population, yes. I don't know if it's over or not, but yes, I'll use your words here. Overpopulated, or just lots. Lots of people. Anybody know how much lots compared to the United States? What is lots? Anybody got an idea? Know China a little bit? Double? 3 times? 4 times? 4 times the size of the United States. $200 times the size of Hong Kong. Now, we bring up Hong Kong because there's a close connection here with China and Hong Kong, right? So Hong Kong was down here. Hong Kong made a move in 40 years. Is it possible that China could be doing some things to make that type of move as well? So we got lots of people. Does that scare you then at all? that why we've got these visions of a Chinese takeover of the world? Can we crush them, or will they crush us? Or what did we learn from chapter 2, hopefully? I mean, does our leaders like Obama and other people, are they all anti-China? And what do they try to do with China as much as they can without compromising maybe all ethical values? What do they try to do? Trade, right? So what we learned from chapter 2 is that no matter how big, no matter how good, no matter how awesome the U.S. and or China is, those two groups can engage in trade and both be better off because of it, right? So when you're looking at a country that's 4 times your size and lots of resources, lots of land, you guys have seen the map of the world. China covers a big area. A lot of it's maybe frozen tundra, but nonetheless, we got a fairly resource-rich place with between labor and natural resources. Maybe that's somebody we should chum up to, right? And so for the most part, that's what we see. But we keep butting heads with this situation to some degree, right? Anybody heard about the latest little bit that's come out in more or less the last month on China being pretty aggressive on hacking computers? Anybody heard that? You've heard a little bit? What did you hear? Anything you can comment on that you've heard about it, or just in general?
Just that they're suspected to hack into like hundreds of our websites.
Websites, databases. They started to catch on. I heard this on the National Public Radio here the last few weeks, and then like after they broke the news that they'd been hacked and they suspected China, then some other people kind of came out of the bushes and said, hey, we've been hacked too. But they didn't want to disclose that. You know, that's not something that you normally want to disclose. Hey, we got hacked. You know, your data's in jeopardy. If you gave us some private information, Chinese might have it now, right? That's not usually, so we don't even know to what extent. But the little bit that's coming out is that the Chinese government seems to be having some influence on getting into data and hacking through. And they were able to see that they use the same style. I don't know, maybe some of you computer people, it's almost like talking and writing. Like when you guys write term papers, the professors can see if you are likely to possibly see that, oh, this isn't you talking, you plagiarized this from somewhere, right? So it's kind of like you leave kind of a mark of how you hacked into something, and then if the hacking kind of matches, you can start to see who the hacker was. It kind of leaves a little trail. So anyway, there's some issues we got to work through. Hopefully it won't come to a grinding halt, and we all still hang on these economic models that if we can somehow get along and just trade, we can both be made better off. All right. So I want to introduce you to a rule that you may have heard before. How many of you have heard of the rule of 70? Anybody hear that from other classes? Not seeing a lot of hands. Be brave. I'm not going to pick on you, I promise. Rule of 70. Heard it in high school? Heard it in any other class? No? Okay. Well, good. Then this will be extra special, because this is something you can use for a lot of different things. So the rule of 70, it's also the rule of 72. I'm following the lead of the textbook here. It all gets you to about the same place, but this is a little bit easier. So the rule of 70, let me just write it out and then we'll talk about it. It is the time it takes a variable to double. Got a squeaky green one here. The time it takes a variable to double in size is approximately 70 divided by the percentage change in that variable, let's call it x. So we might want to add variable x, which is just a generic thing here. So time it takes variable x to double in size is approximately 70 divided by the percentage change in x. All right, so what the heck does that mean? Example. If you invest $100 at 10% interest on your money, it will double to $200 in value in how many years? So you're going to earn interest on your money. So after 1 year, how much money do you have in addition to the 100 that you own? This is an investment. You just put money in some sort of investment vehicle. You're earning 10%. After 1 year, you've got 110. So you earn 10 bucks, right? So then the next year, you get interest on 110. That gets into some compounding stuff, and that's what makes this formula kind of neat, is that it takes that into consideration. So using the formula, how many years, using this, how many years is it going to take that $100 to turn into $200? 7 years. That's how it works. So it's going to take 70 divided by 10, which is the interest rate, 7 years. Nice, easy formula to think about growth rates. And this happens with anything that you have a rate of change. I'm using money here. Next, we're going to look at real GDP per capita. So, how long, if China is at 8,000 years, so example number 2, if China is at $8,000 of per capita real GDP, and it is growing at 7% per year, the rate of economic growth, as we hopefully knew for the test, but I already peeked at some of your answers and found that not all of you knew this for the test. So the rate of economic growth is the percentage change in that real GDP over time. Now I'm talking about real GDP per capita at 8,000. So if China's growing at 7% per year, how long will it take to grow to 46,000? Which happens to be the level that the United States is at. So pull out your calculators if you got one. Not your phones if you got that, or your iPod. So, and Abby, you're just on legitimate stuff there, right? No extracurricular activities, okay? Just want to check your laptop, people. How long is it going to take to get to 46? Given that information, using the rule of 70, how long is it going to take? And I'll just give you a hint. You're going to have to guesstimate a little bit here. I'm not even looking for a perfect answer. How long does it take to double? To get you motivated here. How long does it take China to get to 16,000? 10 years. That's not what I'm asking, but that's a start. How long does it take to get to 46,000? Somebody give me a gut feeling, rough estimate. All of this is estimates, by the way, especially using the rule of 70. It's just kind of a rule of thumb type of deal. How much? About 30. Let's just hear some answers. You guys should have some different answers out there. 30. Anybody else? 25. Anybody else? 22. Anybody else? So what are we at 20 years? I see all the answers are above 20 because at 20 years we're at 32. Another 10 years would bring us up to 64, which is further than what I wanted to go. So one way to kind of do this on the exam or homework as you're thinking about it is to chart it through. We're at 8 today. We're going to double to 16 after how long? Well, 70 divided by the rate of change. 70 divided by 7 is 10 years. So it's going to take 10 years to get to 16. We're going to double again, assuming all of that stays the constant, another 10 years. And then we're going to go to 64,000 after another 10 years. But that's 30 years where I really was asking to stop the train. I wanted to stop the train at 46,000, which is somewhere in here. So we could use some techniques to say, well, okay, that's over 10 years. What is it, a 32,000 jump? I'm only looking to go 15,000, so it's a roughly half. Is that what you guys are doing? You're guesstimating where we might be? We could apply some a little more sophisticated math, but it's somewhere in the middle. But at least you know it's something greater than 20 years, and you can apply it a little bit further. Now, it's likely that it's going to take much longer than that for China to catch up to the United States, because what's going on at the same time for the United States? It's growing too, hopefully. It's not very good right now, by the way, right? That's what our economy's kind of at this maybe 2%, but 1 point something, and we're all just kind of hoping, crossing our fingers. But if the economy's currently growing at 2%, when do we double to 92? 35 years. So that's our rate of change, is 35 years. So if they're 30 years or something to get up to here, but over our 46,000 over 35 years is going to be up to 92,000, China still has some longer period to go because we're growing. But eventually they'll catch up, right? So you could possibly look at a point in time, if their growth rate exceeds our growth rate, then eventually they'll catch up on a income per person basis. Well, that's what we saw here in Hong Kong and Singapore, is that during this time frame, these economies were growing sometimes 7 to 12% a year. The United States was trucking along at its 2 to 3% per year. And so in a fairly short period of time, they were able to catch up to us in that 40-year time frame. All right, questions or comments on that so far? Okay. So what are some things that would cause countries to grow? Let's brainstorm a little bit. And you imagine what types of things might cause there to be more economic activity, because that's how we define GDP. Remember, there's exchanges in the market system. People are buying crap and people are working for other people, and there's something going on, right? So there's an increase in economic activity per person. How does that happen? Where does long-term growth come from? Where does long-term economic growth come from? Technology, right? That's partly something. Good. What else? What's that? Accumulation of capital. So what do you mean by capital? Money? Good. Not in econ class. Capital is not money. Save that for finance class or business class or when you're talking loosely with your parents. But when you're in econ class, capital is machinery, computers, buildings, tools, stuff that helps make other stuff is what's inside our capital bucket. Okay, so technology, capital. I did my K first, but capital, accumulation of capital is what Rachel said. What else? Government changes. Any in mind that you have?
Like going more towards like free trade.
Okay. So government changes that support trade. We've already learned from the previous material that you eliminate tariffs, you eliminate quotas, you eliminate some of those government interventions and do things to help trade, then that can lead to real economic growth. Okay, good. What else? Outsourcing. I just want to see how to put that down. That's possible. What you're using your resources differently. Somebody else has a comparative advantage in that particular input, right? So I just want to be careful about how we think about that. It's certainly a divisive issue. So outsourcing, which would be better use of world capital. I know that's kind of a loaded statement. I don't even want to spend too much time on it, but I think you guys hopefully have the nuts and bolts of this. If India can provide less expensive labor for customer service calls for my particular business, I'm an American business, then we're utilizing that resource in the world for the world and freeing up other resources for us to do something that we're good at doing, right? So it's again that reallocation issue. Okay. What else? Think about Africa and some of these more industrialized countries. What else is different about them that might be causing one to grow faster than the other? Population. So population, possibly even, let me just put it as a different category. I don't know if this is exactly what you meant, Katie, but labor. We made a distinction about mouths to feed. This includes babies. This is people who might be able to actually go out and work. All right, so we have the labor force, the labor pool. So our labor bucket. So now we've got our capital bucket and our labor bucket.
Where would like education go?
Good. Yeah, no, that's definitely one.
Right there.
I mean, to answer your question, education kind of gets sprinkled into other things, but certainly probably most embodied in the labor, right? So those human beings, on average, are better educated in the United States than they are in Africa. And so education is part of what's in the labor. So education is part of what economists call human capital. I haven't talked about that as much in this class. It's been in your textbook and I think maybe mentioned in some of your homeworks. But this gets into the human capital aspect, which is huge for this area, by the way. Education is a very important one. Human capital. Every person's not just a lump of coal that we can throw on the job for 8 hours. It's not a machine like we do, but there's differences in the abilities and skills of the labor force.
So is that how much a country's currency is worth? Have anything to do with it?
In short, no. That's a long answer, and we're going to get into currency later. But we want to think about the real things, similar to how price didn't influence growth, right? Nominal GDP could change because of prices. The price effect is kind of separate than the quantity effect. So we have this, what's called a dichotomy of the economy in terms of what some economists, I think Milton Friedman was one of them, pointed to that money provides a veil to the economy. us as consumers and producers and all the agents that are running around the island, we tend to deal in dollars. And so what he envisioned was that money is kind of the veil to the economy. It's like a curtain. The real economy is behind the curtain. So you got to part the curtain and look at the guts of it. That's what's really going on. That's what we're talking about here. The quantity of capital, the quantity of labor, the amount of technology, the quantity and quality of education. Those are all non-monetary things. Those are stock variables that are in our buckets. Those are the drivers of prosperity. So ultimately what we're starting to list here are our buckets, the scarce resources that we have in the economy. That's what we need to ramp up to enjoy some prosperity in output. So I want you to recall one of the most important models in economics, I think, is the production possibilities curve. Now, your textbook and some of the homeworks, and we did a little bit, I didn't do as much in lecture on the curviness of it, but we did some. And so the real production possibilities curve looks like that. We had the straight lines. That was a simplifying assumption for Japan and the United States when we went through the exercise. But this was the production possibilities curve. The maximum combination of two goods the economy can produce given its available resources and technology. So we can think of, maybe in a bigger picture here, consumption goods. Twinkies, beer, pizza, let's just lump them all together now that we're big timers in macro, and we can take that cigarettes, GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X. Let's take all the C items, lump them all together and call them consumption goods, right? And then maybe down here we can think about resources or capital goods. Our bucket of capital, things that help make other things. And now this gives us a little bit different perspective. Is it possible for us to be at A, B, or C? Are those all possibilities? Yes. Right? So we can be anywhere on the production possibilities curve. All of these points are equally efficient to each other. Each one is fine. They're just different choices. If we're inside, what did that mean? Not using all the resources, not being as efficient as we could be. So we want to be on the outer edge of the production possibilities frontier. That gave us production efficiency or productive efficiency. That was one of our definitions of efficiency. So if we tend to be at point A, how does that compare to point C? So here we've got Twinkies and beer. At point A, we got lots of Twinkies and beer, but not so many tractors, right? So here we've got tractors and computers and buildings and tools, all stuff that helps make other stuff. So we got a little bit of tractors, a lot of Twinkies and beer. Or we can take today's bucket of resources, make some different choices, and be at point C, where we got a lot of tractors, computers, and tools, and a little bit of Twinkies and beer. We don't want to go without our Twinkies and beer. Where are we likely to be next year, depending on what we chose this year? Curve will expand. Which one will it expand? So if we have economic growth in the United States, and it's been 2 to 3% per year on average, some years it's 5%, some years, well, it's negative 3%, or some years it's 1%. Remember, it's all across the board. If we look at the business cycle, we have the ups and downs of the economy, where we're measuring real GDP over time. Part of that's determined by the choices we make at any point in time. What are we doing in 2013? Are we at point C or are we at point A? So if we make the large assumption that we're going to be growing, which one would cause us to grow more likely? Point A or point C next year? C. Right? So that's our flow variable. So back to our buckets. How much in a given year are we devoting towards the accumulation of capital? How much are we devoting towards the education of our kids and our students? How many resources are we devoting towards those activities that will increase the bucket level next year? That's economic growth. So economic growth in this picture is depicted by a shift outward. And so this might be the production possibilities frontier associated with point C, but maybe it's only here with point A. So let's put on a little more meat to this topic so that you have some takeaways to review in your notes later. Suppose that this is the production possibilities frontier for 2013. This red one represents the little bit of shift. Maybe that's where we'll be in 2014 if we were at point A before. So if point A in 2013. We'll hopefully have some growth. We still bought a few tractors and a few computers, and we got people a high school diploma, but we didn't really support post-secondary ed, right? So we did some stuff. Hopefully we have some economic growth. However, if we really pushed ourselves and sacrificed some Twinkies and beer in 2013, then in 2014 we might be a lot better off. So this is the 2014 production possibility. I switched to an F, sorry about that. It's also called the frontier in other textbooks, but this one is the curve, production possibilities curve. And this is if we were at point C in 2013. So there's a couple things I want you to take away from today, and that is our choices that we make today determine our prosperity tomorrow to some degree. So a shift outward of the production possibilities curve is economic growth. And you say, wait a second, Russ, but you told us this last test that economic growth was a percentage change in real GDP. How can we have it both ways? Well, it is both ways conceptually, right? If I'm on this production possibilities curve, I can have more capital and more beer and Twinkies, right? I'm getting more stuff, more Q the next time period. So I'm getting more real stuff. So the shift outward of the production possibilities curve is economic growth. Changes in real GDP is increases in quantities of final goods and services. Changes in real GDP. Change in real GDP is, that's not the best language in the world, so ignore the grammar on that one, but hopefully you get the point. Point's the pop, right? So we'll hopefully relax on the grammar there. Okay. So focus then needs to be placed in terms of changes to government policy. If we value economic growth, to thinking about how these things can change. All right. How do we do that? So what are activities that promote growth? We basically have our list already, our brainstorm list. I'm just going to kind of call out some of that information. So number one, savings and investment. Savings and investment in new capital. So this was Rachel's comment of capital accumulation, having more machines, more tools, more computers. We'll learn later in the chapters how savings and investment go together, but I want you to underline investment right here. We learned from our cigarettes in chapter 4, C plus I plus G plus X. That's the trade-off I kind of placed up here. Consumption goods or capital goods, which was investment in our cigarettes equation. So that helps us get more capital. Number 2, investment in human capital. Investment in human capital. This is the accumulation, not of machinery and tools, but the accumulation of knowledge and skills. The accumulation of knowledge and skills. That was more generically what we listed as education here. It doesn't have to come in the form of sitting in a classroom. Places in Africa would be made probably quite a bit better off by just having a stable library to go to and information. Internet, high-speed internet, and a device in people's hands. That's what we mean by the accumulation of knowledge. Not necessarily sitting in the classroom, the way we've been kind of in tune most of our lives here in the United States. But more generically, the accumulation of knowledge and skills. Number 3, the discovery of new technology. The discovery of new technology. Activities, all of these activities will tend to do the things that we were pointing to over here. What is technology? Anybody want to throw out a definition? We say it all the time. It's like we all know what it is. Oh, Russ, we don't have to talk about it. You know what technology is. It's technology. What is it? I want to press you on this a little bit. What is technology? Is there technology in our gizmo that we're doing the lecture capture with? Yeah, technology's there. What is it? What's technology? Abby? Yes, I think that's where the discovery of technology comes from, is from a problem being there. So what is the actual technology that helps us grow after we find it? What is it? What is technology? Is it something you can touch and feel? Yeah, in the back.
The application of scientific knowledge.
Now you're reading a screen. You Googled. So you're actually going to lose a point for going to an external device on the outside. What's your name? Tyler. So -1 for searching outside. Now, today's your lucky day, because for participation, I'm going to give you and Abby a point. Okay, so you're both going to get a point. So you end up getting nothing, because a -1 plus a +1 equals a zippo. All right, so I don't really buy into that definition, wherever you Googled that from. So is technology something physical you can touch? No. What is it then? What is it? Knowledge. It's just information. Isn't that what technology is? Once you find a new technology, you've learned how to put things together differently, right? Isn't that what these software programs and hardware and all the stuff that we think embodies technology? It's just information. All right, we'll pick up there on
goods today and more goods in the future? Because you're producing less today, putting more into capital.